LibriVox.org. The Old Man of Visions by Algernon Blackwood. The image of Habakkuk, sitting in his watchtower alone with the stars, leaped into my mind the moment I saw him, and the curious expression of his eyes proclaimed at once that here was a being who allowed the world of small effects to pass him by, while he himself dwelt among the eternal verities. It was only necessary to catch a glimpse of the bent grey figure, so slight yet so tremendous, to realize that he carried staff and wallet, and was travelling alone in a spiritual region uncharted and full of wonder, difficulty, and fearful joy. The inner eye perceived this quite as clearly as the outer was aware of his Hebraic ancestry. But along what winding rivers, through what haunted woods, by the shores of what singing seas he pressed forwards towards the mountains of his goal, no one could guess from a mere inspection of that wonderful old face. To have stumbled upon such a figure in the casual way I did seemed incredible to me even at that time, and yet I at once caught something of the uplifting airs that followed this inhabitant of a finer world, and I spent days, and considered them well spent, trying to get into conversation with him, so that I might know something more than the thin disguise of his holding a reader's ticket for the museum library. To reach the stage of intimacy where actual speech is a hindrance to close understanding, one need not in some cases have spoken at all, and thus by merely setting my mind, and above all my imagination, into tune with his, and by steeping myself so much in his atmosphere that I absorbed and then gave back to him with my own stamp the forces he exhaled, it was at length possible to persuade those vast seeing eyes to turn in my direction, and our glances having once met, I simply rose when he rose, and followed him out of the little smoky restaurant so closely up the street that our clothes brushed, and I thought I could even catch the sound of his breathing. Whether, having already weighed me, he accepted the office, or whether he was grateful for the arm to lean upon with his many years' burden, I did not know. But the sympathy between us was such that without a single word we walked up that foggy London street to the door of his lodging in Bloomsbury, while I noticed that at the touch of his arm the noise of the town seemed to turn into deep singing, and even the hurrying passers-by seemed bent upon noble purposes. And though he barely reached to my shoulder, and his grey beard almost touched my glove as I bent my arm to hold his own, there was something immense about his figure that sent him with towering stature above me, and filled my thoughts with enchanting dreams of grandeur and high beauty. But it was only when the door had closed on him with a little rush of wind, and I was walking home alone, that I fully realized the shock of my return to earth, and on reaching my own rooms I shook with laughter to think I had walked 1.5 miles with a complete stranger without uttering a single syllable. And then the laughter suddenly hushed, as I caught my face in the glass with the expression of the soul still lingering about the eyes and forehead, and for a brief moment my heart leaped to a sort of noble fever in the blood, leaving me with the smart of the soul's wings stirring beneath the body's crushing weight. And when it passed, I found myself dwelling upon the only words he had spoken when I left him at the door. I am the Old Man of Visions, and I am at your service. I think he never had a name, at least it never passed his lips, and perhaps lay buried with so much else of the past that he clearly deemed unimportant. To me, at any rate, he became simply the Old Man of Visions, and to the little waiting maid and the old landlady he was known simply as Mr. Neither more nor less. The impenetrable veil that hung over his past never lifted for any vital revelations of his personal history, though he evidently knew all countries of the world, and had absorbed into his heart and brain the experience of all possible types of human nature. And there was an air about him not so much of "ask me no questions" as "do not ask me, for I cannot answer you in words." He could satisfy, but not in mere language. He would reveal, but by the wonderful words of silence only, for he was the old man of visions, and visions needed no words, being swift and of the spirit. Moreover, the landlady, poor, dusty, faded woman, the landlady stood in awe, and disliked being probed for information in a passageway down which he might at any moment tread, for she could only tell me, "He just came in one night years ago, and he's been here ever since. And more than that I never knew. Just came in one night years ago." This adequately explained him, for where he came from, or was journeying to, was something quite beyond the scope of ordinary, limited language. I pictured him suddenly turning aside from the stream of unimportant events, quietly stepping out of the world of straining, fighting, and shouting, and moving to take his rightful place among the horses of the still, spiritual region where he belonged, by virtue of long pain and difficult attainment. For he was unconnected with any conceivable network of relations, friends, or family, and his terrible aloofness could not be disturbed by any one unless with his permission and by his express wish. Nor could he be imagined as belonging to any definite set of souls. He was apart from the world, and above it. But it was only when I began to creep a little nearer to him, and our strange, silent intimacy passed from mental to spiritual, that I began really to understand more of this wonderful old man of visions. Steeped in the tragedy and convulsed with laughter at the comedy of life, he yet lived there in his high attic, wrapped in silence as in a golden cloud. And so seldom did he actually speak to me, that each time the sound of his voice, that had something elemental in it, something of winds and waters, thrilled me with the power of the first time. He lived, like Habakkuk, alone with the stars, and it seemed impossible more and more to link him on anywhere into practical dealings with ordinary men and women. Life somehow seemed to pass below him, and yet the small, selfish spirit of the recluse was far from him, and he was tenderly and deeply responsive to pain and suffering, and more particularly to genuine yearning for the far things of beauty. The unsatisfied longings of others could move him at once to tears. "My relations with men are perfect," he said one night as we neared his dwelling. "I give them all sympathy out of my stores of knowledge and experience, and they give to me what kindness I need. My outer shell lies within impenetrable solitude, for only so can my inner life move freely along the paths and terraces that are thronged with the beings to whom I belong." And when I asked him how he maintained such deep sympathy with humanity, and yet absolved himself apparently from action as from speech, he stopped against an area railing and turned his great eyes on to my face, as though their fires could communicate his thought without the husk of words. "I have peered too profoundly into life and beyond it," he murmured, "to wish to express in language what I know. Action is not for all always, and I am in touch with the cisterns of thought that lie behind action. I ponder the mysteries. What I may solve is not lost for lack either of speech or action, for the true mystic is ever the true man of action,